Hello everyone, and this is about the trend a little bit in blockchain towards what we think should be called public applications. We're still toying with a term for this, related to a next internet maybe, Web3 or whatever you want to call it. So it will be follow a little bit on blockchain history. So some of you might think it's boring in the beginning, but I promise you will learn something new. This is bleeding edge that we'll land up with at the end. A little bit about ChromaWay. I will mainly talk about the first bullet here. So our CTO Alex, he came up with the first way to use Bitcoin not only for drug money, but for some kind of financial use cases. So he made this protocol that you could issue tokens called color coins in 2012. That was the first sort of token issuance protocol, and it was an open source product that attracted a lot of people that were interested in this kind of bleeding edge things at the time. It was hard to explain exactly why would you have tokens and what's the use. I did some kind of feeble attempt in 2013 on a meetup that no one understood what it was about. So it's kind of cool that it turned up into the blockchain industry. So I'd worked with Alex from a previous startup, and he tried to introduce me to Bitcoin, and I studied economics, so I thought it was just some kind of scam, so I didn't read it. But eventually I joined his open source project, and I was paid 1 Bitcoin an hour for doing some development. Shitty paid, but we decided we should start a company. So this is a picture. Actually assembled a few pictures from the history. Bitcoin Not Bombs. Says the title. I was speaking for some students at a high school, and I wanted to have something, show some pictures to explain this kind of technology. So I found some pictures, but they're pretty good for explaining a little bit on the story of blockchain. So I took this in Brooklyn in 2014. I kind of like the message that sometimes is forgotten in all the talk about money, that there can actually be some social good with blockchain. Bitcoin Not Bombs. It's pretty nice. Also, I wanted these high school students, how can I discourage them from a shitty career as an entrepreneur? I will show some real world pictures of business travel in the beginning of a startup. This is from Brooklyn. We have Ido, one of my co-founders, who now left the company, and my mate, sleeping in his bunk bed in Brooklyn. But we're there to meet some friends from our open source community, and we had some good times as well. So we met up with one of our friends. He had started his own project, so we met at a cafe and then took the subway to this dinner. So the guy from our project is Vitalik Buterin over up here. So he started kind of a successful blockchain after this, the public blockchain space. So that's one direction after 2014, Ethereum, and that kind of world computer IDs. This dinner is also with Charlie Shrem, and he's famous because he was actually charged with money laundering or something like that. Eventually he was turned out for illegal money exchange, something like that, because he had a Bitcoin exchange that was had sold some Bitcoin to people that were buying drugs on Silk Road. So he was actually only here until 8 when the parole officer, he had this kind of a thing on his legs, so he had to run at 8 o'clock. So Charlie, that's the second direction for Bitcoin. It became like he went to jail, so that's not a good opportunity. And the third direction is even worse, and that's what we took. We started to work with banks. So we got a project with a bank in Estonia to do basically like Swish, but on the Bitcoin blockchain using tokens, a stable coin in 2014 and 2015. So we thought, yeah, this is going to be the thing. But then we found out that the financial players weren't really that interested in the Bitcoin network. It doesn't scale, and it's totally open, etc. So we started to do a little bit more what they wanted. This is on another project on tokens with Thunderbeam, whatever. So we started to work with the Swedish land registry in the case with smart contracts for buying and selling real estate, and that got us a lot of attention. But I won't talk that much about that project now. It's more on the, we came up with a technology during this time, and that's a relational blockchain. It's a combination between a relational database and a blockchain, because we felt if we need to index information in order to have fast retrieval on Bitcoin transactions and stuff, we came up with the idea, let's use this mature technology, the relational blockchain, and make it a relational database and make a blockchain out of it and add the consensus rules, etc. So this is something that we're going to sell to enterprises. We've been working on it for some time. It's going to be released more publicly later this year, but it's still in use in various client projects, but it's not just. So that idea, this private blockchain, post-chain, combination between a relational database and a blockchain, we tried to get some VC funding for that idea and take it further. But instead, we sort of got into negotiation with a pretty tough VC that wanted to control everything. So in the end, in December, after 6 months of negotiation, Alex came up with the next, I think it's fourth invention. We can make a public blockchain out of this. We'll take the private blockchain, add a new consensus layer, and now we can make a platform that you can really make powerful decentralized applications that's actually easy to work with, powerful, and super scalable. So we came up with this idea, and we decided to stop negotiating with the VCs and do a private pre-sale of tokens instead. So we came up with this Chromapolis platform. Call it a relational blockchain technology. That's a technological aspect, but mainstream dApps, that's more the philosophical idea. We want to make decentralized applications something that's actually used by users, so more than a vision. And of course, everyone is not so happy with the way internet looks today, with the centralized powers, etc. So we think that decentralization is something that's coming, but we want to have a platform where you can actually make a competition to these kind of players. So something powerful where you can make serious applications. So I will talk a little bit with the problems with centralized applications. First, we had a lack of choices and features because they cater more for the main business idea, the main users. Like Facebook is advertisement funded, so why isn't there a way to buy out? I don't like to see advertisement. Why can't I buy a monthly fee and get rid of that? Because they are focused on their idea and they don't need to cater for those kind of obvious features because they have the network effect. Information asymmetry. So we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. We think we know, but they know actually much more. So there's been cases of security breaches. I'm pretty sure that there are some people on the inside that knows about the security issues. Privacy violations is something that's very related to this, of course. We heard about you don't know actually what they're doing with your data, and sometimes it turns up a company that's been buying data and doing things that are not good for the users. And of course, if you have a big platform, they can censor the users. So they often go for the easy road to just, in case of doubt, kick them out. So that could be, shadow banning on Reddit and stuff like that. You heard about it. So it's not only for criminals that are censored, it's like normal users. Another thing is, they have good uptimes, of course, but in principle, it's a centralized solution, and if you're using it, you can't really be sure about the availability of the platform. So I'll do a little bit more complaints, and then I'll go to the solutions, of course. So the question is about VCs and blockchain and monopolies. Peter, to the right, he's a big fan of monopolies. But the question is a little bit, should a blockchain be a monopoly? And what's you have open source code, you're supposed to have an open platform. Should you start to charge everyone after some time for every transaction? It doesn't really work that way. And VCs really want quite some an exit in a not too far distance, maybe stimulate the wrong projects. So that's something good. Perhaps with the ICO market, it's more like crowdfunded. If you want to do a monopoly, it always leads also to some kind of lack of interoperability. Even if you have open standards, like we have the XMPP chat protocol, for example, that's some kind of an open standard, but still not completely supported by Google or the people that are advocating the standards. A lot of dead internet standards that never became something useful due to one of these big players. Then we have the issue around service discontinuation. I actually used Google Reader quite a lot for another dead protocol to read news on the internet. But when a market share or the Google decides, it had users, but still they decided that it's not in our core business to have this platform, and it just discontinued, and you have nothing to do as a user. So that's some issues. Yeah, so what are the alternatives? You can have something run by a non-profit or government, but in the end, someone else is controlling that non-profit or government. You can have crowdfunding, but it's still, you don't get the control. You fund something, but you don't really know what's happening with the product afterwards. Open source and free software. That works mainly for your local software on your computer. If you need to connect to a server, then the question is who owns the server? Even if the server runs open source software, you can't access and see what's going on. So it doesn't really solve the complete picture. Peer-to-peer is a good starting on the technology base. And blockchain, of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum. That's a great part of solving this, but the public blockchains so far have severe resource limits and usability as well. So it's good for money, investments, etc., but not really for running complex applications. So we want to take a move towards publicly hosted applications, more democratic, power to the users. So the users should be in control over the service. And the users should have some kind of control over the governance of the service, how it's operated. So that's what we want to achieve. Of course, it's a scale of applications. You can probably see this as a scale. So who we need to care for? We need to care for ordinary users, maybe with phones. And so probably can't participate in the world computer using the processing power here, but still we need to support that. As well as power users that are more interested and have better hardware, etc., so they can be part of this system. But then we want to have this actually being run by service providers that are paid for running applications, but we need to have it distributed among different providers, so we can't have a single one take control over the network and make the decisions, or a single government taking control and pressuring that cloud operator who it is today. So we need to have this kind of design that the service providers are more than one, and they are easily to replace, and the users should be in control over the system because they are actually paying it either in cash or in usage. Yeah, so there's some technical requirements. I already mentioned that we need to, of course, have secure replication among the service providers, and it's really ideal if people can inspect and see that they are behaving in the right way, that the integrity is preserved. We also need kind of marketplace so you can switch between providers, etc. So that's the philosophy around our platform. So the question is, we talked a little bit of theory, but can you give an example of what should a decentralized application be? And Twitter is a good example of the problems. So we have the core infrastructure used by everyone, controlled by a single company in the USA. And who controls USA? The US population. I won't go into more politics, that speaks for itself. But I mean, there are different values, for example. We're not completely aligned with American values or American politics. but still controlled by an American company. So that's a problem. They can easily censor posts, and that's the easiest way, of course. They can prioritize, decide who to ban, and they try to preserve their market power by shutting off alternative clients and stuff like that. So that's what we have today. We want to have Twitter instead, and this is just a business plan for how this can work. And we want to work with entrepreneurs, so go ahead and do this, because we can't do everything. We want to launch a Twitter clone that will take on the world. Probably not, unless no one takes it off, then we'll have to do it. But whatever. So find 1 million users that are interested in this, pay $1 for the crowdfunding. You have developers for 4 years. But I think you need a platform that's easy to code on, that you actually, and that's also something that in the evolution of internet, it started with CGI scripts coded in C on computers, and then someone came up, oh, we can do PHP. Oh, that's much faster. Let's do some hacks. And then someone came up with, oh, let's do Ruby on Rails, fewer lines of code. And then someone, let's go to JavaScript. So ease of use and ease of coding is very important for doing complex applications. So we need that kind of platform if you're going to do this with 4 developers. Also powerful, of course, that can support millions of users, and scalable. And you can pay 10 providers, for example, to run this in a decentralized way. And the chance of 10 providers from different countries colluding, and then you're back to an idea of a world conspiracy. So if you don't believe in the world conspiracy and you make your own choices on providers, it's very likely that you'll have a decentralized network can't be turned off. And yeah, we actually started to do a little prototype internally on our new. So yeah, this is where we are now. An ugly page, but it seems to work at least. So we have the basic frameworks in place. Another more enterprisey case, we talk about Twitters and now, that could be something. We have been working on a similar case for a private blockchain, but as we see it, this is not decided that we should go to a public blockchain, but it could easily be done. So we have the issue around green investments and environmental reporting. It's basically validating companies that are checking about the claims of be good for the environment. We have investors that want to make sure that what they invest in really has the environmental effect. So we have a lot of players wanted to communicate around information. But really, of course, you want to run this as a private blockchain at the start, because the current offerings on the public blockchains don't scale enough. But then you come to the question, who's really wants to run this? You know, each individual investors, do they want to go to the IT department? Let's set up a node and connect to this private blockchain. And how should it be governed with different players? So we see that this could be like a resource that is put in this more secure, decentralized cloud. It is governed using some rules that are specified between the players. Maybe you have a voting built into the system, how it should be running. So you can make some kind of mini democracies coded in the applications. So that's one. I don't think this is only for social media use cases and the internet. It could also be for enterprise applications as we go on. I put on a slide about the games as well. For our platform, it has, great scalability, performance, ease of use. So what we want to do is make something more than the current blockchain games. We are just focused on the ownership of a particular asset and be able to move between games. We want to make you be able to deploy the complete game logic in a decentralized applications and maybe give away the control over the game. So you put it out there as a developer and you say to the users, you govern this. You can vote. When I do my updates, you can vote and you can pay me for the improvements to the systems. I guarantee I can't shut this down, because if I want to discontinue this after some years when I get bored of doing the development or the market share goes down, you can fund the operations and the hosting yourself. So basically, it's completely open, impossible to shut down. So, and the complete game logic in this decentralized application platform that we're building on Chromapolis. And the client should be open source, of course, so you can always access the game. So we're looking for gaming companies and people with crazy ideas to work on a platform actually. Can mention another cool case we're doing with legal works. They promised me fancy coffee if I mention that project, but that's also something that could potentially run on Chromapolis. We're doing a project around the cap table and the share registry of small companies. So can we make that into a digital process? Then again, what's the question? Who should run the nodes? Should it be legal works, the legal company, in ChromaWay, but then it's ours. And should a small company run a node or some kind of independent provider? Kind of lends itself as well to being a resource governed in a new way. But we'll see where we land on that project. So that's basically what I wanted to say now, and I'll be hanging around and ask me questions. Looking for, which I don't mention on this slide, but of course looking for entrepreneurs. We also have a little, some kind of incentive structure. We have done a pre-sale and want to stimulate activities on our new platform. Thank you.